As you're getting your house ready to go to market, there's a couple of different things that I see that a lot of times, especially people that maybe this is the first time you're selling a house, you bought it 3, 5 years ago, the first time you're putting it on the market and you're unsure, kind of like what the next steps are going to be. But there are some things that I see where ultimately like it can be sometimes a mistake and ultimately cost you a lot of money. So I want to take a little bit of time in this video to kind of nail out a couple of the things that I see, as well as we've created a guide for, as you get your house on the market. It's available in the comments below. There's a link. Feel free. It's free to download, and it gives you some other like 5 great things to pay attention to when you're putting your house on the market. But for this video, I just wanted to talk. I want to expand on that concept as well. Things that ultimately I feel like I see happen, and that ultimately sometimes don't benefit. So anyway, let's go ahead. Let's get into it. Hey guys, I'm Bill Stewart with the Bill Stewart Homes team here at Remax Moves. And so, I talk to home sellers all the time, and as we're getting homes ready for the market, there's a lot of things that I want to look at as we start to prepare, because the preparation isn't something that you want to rush. You want to make sure that you have a comprehensive plan, understand where you're going, take some of the stress off your shoulders, and build a solid, know what the roadmap's going to look like. And that starts with, partnering. I always say real estate is a team sport. So it requires a really great team to be able to walk through to see from start to finish. And a lot of times what happens is people see that homes go on the market, and then like 10 days later, maybe they're under contract, or maybe it take 2 to 3 months before you get that house under contract. And really what they're only looking at is like, well, they went on market here. How many days on market? What they fail to understand is that there was a whole preparation game plan that went on behind the scenes, that possibly between thought, concept of putting a house on the market, to then at that point, the execution of actually selling the property can be, sometimes 6 months, 7 months. It feels like a lot longer than just, 30 or 40 days or 50 days, whatever it takes to sell the house. And sometimes like when we're talking with our clients, we got to, that's where that frustration comes in, because of the fact that it's not just the fact that that house has been on the market for 2, 3, 4 weeks. It's that they've been thinking about it for months. And at that point, like really wanting things to go. So as you start to get your home ready to go, as you start to put together your pre-listing plan, there are a couple of things that I wanted to talk about today that ultimately I think you should be aware of, and things not to do. In fact, I'm going to come back to that at the end. There's 2 things that ultimately I've been seeing recently that ultimately I feel like you should not do, only because of the fact that it could potentially either sway a decision or have you spend more money than necessary. So, really when you start looking at, getting ready, putting together the game plan, I think one of the first things that you need to do as a homeowner is first understand that basically this is no longer a home. It is now a house. It's now a property. I use these words interchangeably with clients, where at this point we are having to emotionally pull back out of the property and understand that we are now going to market with a product, that we need to understand what that product is, what are the key selling features from it, and at that point really start to build out a strategy in and around how we're going to take that product to market and get the most amount for it. So that's not just looking at, it's not just decluttering. It's kind of removing, it's not just going through and depersonalizing or anything else like that. It's the idea that emotionally we have to separate ourselves from that property. And I think a lot of times where it's very easy. I know I'm the same way. I have a weird attention and a weird, I guess, I'm attached to things that are of inanimate objects, things like cars. Sometimes it's hard for me when I have an emotional deal, because I spend a lot of time in my car. And at that point, like trading a car in or selling a car, seeing that car for the last time is always kind of a weird response. And that's a car that I've had for maybe 5, 7 years, much less a home that I've had for, maybe, 5, 10 years. And that at that point, it's a shared environment. So I get the idea of it, but the idea is that you're now in the business of selling the home. And that ultimately nobody understands nobody understands the memories the same way that you will in your own home. That buyers are walking in, looking at it like they would any other product out there. They have no emotional tie to it, but that we want to create, we want to have that house show in a way that ultimately creates the beginning of the emotional connection of this could be my home and where we're going to look. So, when I look at things like as you're starting to get ready for it, like the idea is that home decor, things that may not seem cluttered to you, but yet at the end of it, when you walk in, how does that make somebody feel? It could make, having too much stuff in any room could make it feel smaller than what it is. And at that point could be a turn off. The other is not everybody's going to agree on what, they're not going to all agree with your decor choices. So I would say try to bring as much neutrality into your home decor when you're coming in and looking at staging and things like that. Now, sometimes I'll hear people say, get rid of family photos, get rid of this, get rid of that. I don't say you have to get rid of, you don't have to sterilize the house. You're just trying to neutralize it to a point where somebody could see their family in it, their stuff. But there are times, actually, what's weird is that personal photos, as long as it's, done in the right way, sometimes buyers actually connect with a home because of what the family that represents that property. If this family's here, this is the kind of house that we want. These are the memories we want to have. But I think it's all done with the idea of like making sure that you're tailoring it to a point where it's not overwhelming. Somebody doesn't walk in and like, oh my gosh, there's, you may love a big, sectional couch. But if at the end of it, that sectional couch is in essence like 6 feet away from the other wall and it squeezes that room into a very tiny space, that may not be helpful when it comes down to looking at. So I would say looking at, my wife and I sold our house. We had a smaller size living room that kind of, fed in directly between our kitchen. And so at that point we had, a couch, a love seat, and a recliner. And ultimately, we made the decision that we were going to remove the love seat and the recliner and only have the couch, make that room feel a little bit bigger, be able to give a little bit more separation away from the kitchen. And ultimately, I feel like it did very well, which meant that we had to move some stuff into a storage unit for a temporary amount of time, knowing that we were going to be using it in the next place, but that what worked for us, we knew potentially couldn't hold back buyers. So it's not sterilizing the property, but just, we want it to look, as clean and sometimes people, the idea of having somebody live there, what they're looking, they can connect with things, but it's definitely comes down to making wise choices when it comes down to those things. The other is going to be taking a look at, understanding as you're starting to go to market and you're looking at things like your first attractor and anything, as with any product that goes out there, your price is ultimately going to get attention, the value, the benefits. Then at that point of the value and the benefits of that property, if somebody sees something and it looks good, the next place they're going to go look is at price. And if at price it is outside of the mark or does not seem reasonable, at that point, you're going to deter people from coming out and looking at it, because at the end of it, they know it's outside of their price range. They're really not interested, or let's just face it, they're not going to see it, because most of the time people are looking in search engines, whether it be, on our website, we have a property search. There's Zillow, there's realtor.com. There's all these different areas that buyers can go and search properties. And typically what they're going to do is they're going to put a budget cap, and they might put a budget in terms of, I don't want to look at something below this price point, but I definitely don't want to look at something above that. And if at the end of it, you're outside the mark of where a buyer pool is looking, or you're more expensive than other alternatives, realistically, you could be selling somebody else's house versus your own. But the idea is that the list price is ultimately nothing other than just a means to attract a buyer. You're basically throwing out an auction number, and in general, a lower number will drive more attention than a higher number. And at that point, the more entrance you have in that auction drives a higher probability that you're going to get an offer, if not multiple offers. And at that point, the name of the game is to sell the house. But what you really want to take a look at outside of your list price is really understand what is your net versus gross. I think a lot of times people are caught up in the idea of looking at a sale price and being kind of fixated on the dollar number that's in the offer. A lot of times what we're missing are the little pieces that come into it in general, as far as like what's going to be coming out of that total number that, in essence, what is the seller going to net? So what we work with our clients is that we work what we consider a seller net sheet. So we can give a couple of different scenarios when we're taking a look at price. Maybe we have a range of pricing that we're looking at when we're going to market. And the goal of all of those things to see the difference between, say, one price point or the other. What's that going to do from a net perspective? What am I going to actually take in my pocket? So, and it's the actual costs that come along. So it's not just commission, because commission's one number, but there's also deed stamps or transfer fees. Your HOA may have an asset transfer, when they go to sell. There could be, other hidden fees within HOAs or those things that you may not be aware of. The other is going to be the fact that in South Carolina, we close with an attorney. If you're in a different state, you may close with a title company, but either way, there are going to be fees to be able to do those things and understanding what those fees look like. The other is going to be property taxes, prorated property taxes. Depending on when you sell in the year, property taxes aren't typically due until the beginning of the end of the year is when the bills come out. Beginning of the year is kind of where it starts to be pulled out of escrow if you have a mortgage. If not, then basically writing that check at the beginning of the year. So depending on when you sell, there'll be a certain amount that is owed by the seller and a certain amount that's owed by the seller as a credit to the buyer. So that when that tax bill comes out, when they have to write that tax bill, in general, your portion has already been given to them in a credit. And so they make the payment to your property tax and everything's all done. But knowing where all of those are. So the other is, the concept of if you're sitting on a house and it's on the market and say you've moved away, there are going to be carrying costs that come along with this. Now, whether it's going to be the mortgage over a certain amount of time, it's going to be utilities, insurance, the homeowner association fees continue to move forward. So making sure that we understand price and time are also directly correlated. So the idea is it's not just about once we get an offer and go under contract and sell the house, but it's going to be the journey across the board as to what's the actual cost of selling a home over a certain amount of time. So again, coming back down to price and time are going to correlate. The more value that price drives, the more attention it will drive from buyers, and the faster you'll actually get that home under contract and sold. And then, or we go higher, the idea is that could potentially have us sit longer on the market. And so at that point, what is that going to do from a net perspective if at the end of it, there are other carrying costs that come along with basically holding out for that amount of time? And then, it's taking all of these things into account. The idea of the goal is to sell the house at the best possible net price. And I just want to be able to walk through, have sellers take a look at a couple of different scenarios over that price and time and range and how that's all going to look. So just understanding all of those. The other is, when we're looking at, going back to, I guess, the concept of staging, one of the things that I'll walk into, especially when I'm showing buyers homes, I don't think it's something that homeowners are actually aware of at times, especially if you have pets. But the idea is most of the time, if you have a dog, I know you have a dog, and so do my clients, so do everything else. So you living in the house, understanding that you're in the house on a day in, day out basis, it's harder to be able to smell that, whereas somebody who's not in your house frequently, they're not quite as numb to it. So when they walk in, they can smell it. Well, buyers, when they smell that immediately, the idea is that that can turn off a buyer. It could also be not just pet smell, but it could be things like the idea of, I see air wicks all the time where it's every room's got some sort of scented smell. Sometimes it may not be the same smell, but it's the idea is that you're used to it, you smell it. It's the fragrance is appealing to you, but it can be overwhelming to buyers when they walk in where it's whoa, this is very, very strong. And so at that point, are more focused on the smell than they are about the actual layout and floor plan or the other selling features in the house. They're distracted. So, but sometimes too, when you're smelling air wicks or candles or any of those things, it can also be a signal to buyers that they're covering up for something that is there that they may not be aware of. And so at that point, what are we trying to cover up versus having a more neutral or really as little to no smells in the house as possible. I actually had a client who is, they love to cook, and it's one of those things where it's like, for the idea of walking into somebody's house and garlic being, and the spices that they were using, it was all great. But as it lingered in the air coming in, the day after or 2 days after, and it's still there, it doesn't, it has a different smell. And so at that point it can actually, it's not quite as appetizing as it was probably on the day that they were cooking. And it definitely became part of feedback when we got back. So, the idea of, if you've got issues, deep cleaning carpets, making sure the curtains and things like that, over time, curtains will start to take on those smells. Take the curtains, either wash them, dry clean them, replace them, where, at that point now it's little things that ultimately at that point will pay off in a huge amount. The other is, ask a neighbor or a friend to come over and be brutally honest on whether or not, do they smell something? Do they not? Somebody who's not involved. I know that that's sometimes, a little, I guess, invasive or sometimes a little personal to have somebody come where we have to take a look at it. But I'd rather it be somebody who at the end of it has they are not in any interest in buying my home. Give me the opinion to fix in order to attract the people that are actually doing it. So neutralize all smells. The other is, when we're looking at showings, there's a lot of times where I know, and I battle this a lot. Actually, I have great clients who are very open and will keep things moving. But the idea that this market is moving quickly. There are more homes that are on the market. So the idea of restricting access to a property, or making sure that you have the right game plan from a showing perspective, and then holding true to those showing times. So, because I have had in the past where individuals will push back, like we'll have clients that'll push back and say, can you see if they can reschedule for tomorrow? Well, that sounds good. That assumes that you're the only house that they're looking at. And that the idea is that tomorrow they may have found 4 other homes. And so at this point, they're not thinking about your home anymore because they found the house that they were interested in, as they went to other showings. Not that they wouldn't have chosen your home, but that you became out of the conversation and another home stepped into it. So, this kind, like I've seen where there's no showings on certain days of the week, weekends, or that they need a 24-hour notice in order to be able to do a showing. I would say, while I understand that there's going to be certain things, and there are times where I've had to block showings based on, things being done at the house, or just, somebody's sick or things like that. On the rare occasion that those things happen, for the most part, our clients have been pretty good and just set the example that we want to make sure that we're giving as much access as possible to make that property available to any and all buyers over a certain amount of time. Now, that doesn't mean we have 24-hour access, that it's just the idea that we have to give enough access in order to make it accessible to the buyers as they're coming through, that we can also scoop up kind of last minute showings where, somebody's driving in your neighborhood and says, I found that house. Can we see if we can see it? Absolutely. If we can make it work, great. But the idea is that, short notice, we understand. I try to make it 2-hour notice is kind of where I play. But at the end of it, that's not a hard and fast rule. It really boils down to giving us enough time to make sure that we can prepare the house for the showing, as opposed to having clients on edge at all times. But even then, there's going to be certain times where if we can make it happen, we want to make sure we can get as many people in. So is basically a lot of times what I think is the most convenient, or the more convenient you make a house, the faster it is that it's going to sell. That doesn't mean that you don't pre-qualify buyers or that you are just letting anybody and everybody in. But the idea is that, the less restrictive it is, the easier it is for access to be able to flow, the more showings you're going to get and the better off you will be. So, I would say one of the things with showings is have a showing plan. I will tell clients all the time, have plastic containers in your kitchen, in your bathrooms, even in your bedrooms, where you could easily move things off counters into those storage containers and somewhere off or away, in order to, at that point where it's all still in one place, but it's easily moved and off, so that we're not have clutter on countertops, kitchen countertops, bathroom countertops. The other is make sure that kids and pets, that there's a plan of action to be able to be in or out within, say, 30 minutes or less. Like, could you do that? As far as trying to make it where it's easy enough that you're not having to do this mad dash. Now, but the other is that you're selling a house that's really sometimes very inconvenient. We get it. But the idea is our goal is to speed through the process, get offers as quickly as possible in order to minimize the amount of inconvenience that goes along. So by opening up and having better access, I think you'll find that you'll have a much better experience, and you will be on the market for less time. All right, so really, these are just a couple of things that I wanted to talk about. That we do have a guide for especially for individuals that may have not sold homes before. Maybe it's your first house that you're selling. That we did put a guide, so there is a link down below for some other tips that can be applied, and what you're in order to get prepared. And it's a journey. It's going to take some time. This is not something that's going to happen overnight, nor should it. It's the idea that you have to have a game plan. You have to have a strategy. You really have to have the right team, making sure that you're picking those people. So whether it's picking the right agent, picking the right time, picking the right price, and understanding why all of those things make sense is, why you're choosing those or doing those or having a pass. What I say, the more you can understand the why, the better I can get behind the how and the what. So anyway, I put together a free guide. It's just basically the seven huge mistakes first-time home sellers make, and it covers, basically the reactive side of the process, like why the highest offer isn't always the best one, and specific red flags regarding low commission agents, things like that, things that you should be aware of. Not to say that those things are good or bad. The idea is just understanding and making sure that you have those questions asked. So, if you combine the proactive steps in this video, and then at that point, the warnings in that guide, man, I feel like you will be unstoppable in this market. So click the link below, download it. If you have any questions, feel free, give me a shout. I have my contact information is down below. If you're curious to know more about what we look at in terms of strategies and getting things ready, be more than happy to share that with you. So anyway, good luck. If like I said, we are a great resource. Feel free to reach out, but this market has been tricky. It is definitely, standing out is going to separate those that sell or the homes that go on the market that sell others. And so ultimately our goal is to make sure that we're really creating the obvious choice in the market for our clients and ensuring that they get it. So anyway, I hope you have a great day and stay warm out there. It is going to be cold over the next couple of weeks. Seems like pretty much everywhere in the country. So talk to you soon, and thanks for stopping in.